Episode 16 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode on today, the 14th of January, 2021. I hope everyone's doing okay. We've got a very interesting show lined up for you, as always. I'm going to say that, aren't I? I'm not going to tell you it's boring. But anyway, we'll learn some interesting stuff today. Today's show, it's all about a sort of continental union that sometimes gets forgotten about. Yeah, we're going to be looking at the African Union today. I think that's an organization that's probably going to increasingly play an important role in the future, I suspect. And we're also going to be learning a little bit about one of the most controversial presidents in American history. Nah, it's not him. Or him. Nah, it's another one. It's another one. You'll see. Anyway, so yeah, today's statement, it's all about the African Union's role in peace building. We're going to be learning about some new concepts. You have peace building, you have peacekeeping, are the sort of peacekeeping is perhaps the best known. You have peace building, and you also have a relatively new concept that's sort of been introduced in the last few years of sustaining peace. So that's what we've got coming up for you. Today's statement is it's provided to us. We've got a new contributor to today's show from Mr. Dwayne Parker, who lives out in Washington, D.C. You'll be hearing his dulcet tones will be taking you through today's episode. Thank you very much, Dwayne, for sending your work in. I know Dwayne is one of the biggest fans of the show, so very pleased to be able to feature you in today's episode. The statement specifically that we're going to be looking at, it's from a couple of years ago. It is in a meeting of the Security Council, dated the 5th of December 2018. The theme of the meeting is post-conflict reconstruction and peace, security and stability. Under the agenda item, peace building and sustaining peace, post-conflict reconstruction and peace, security and stability. And the guy who's actually speaking is a gentleman called Musa Faki Mohammed, who was, I believe, the president of the African Union at the time. And so it's going to be quite a general statement covering. He's going to be sort of painting rather broad strokes over the general security situation in Africa. Okay, so as usual, before we start, we're going to have just a quick look at some of the background to the African Union. I don't know what you know. As I say, it's they come up quite a bit, and it's always useful to know a bit about them. So the African Union, it was created in 1999, on the 9th of September 1999. It's made up of 55 member states, and it replaced, you had an organization prior to it called the Organization of African Unity that was created back in 1963. So the African Union, its headquarters are in Addis Ababa. And I expect I've got a few people, maybe some of the viewers out there who are watching, maybe even you do work there for the African Union. What's it like working there? Stick it in the comments if there's any interesting stories you can share with us. Okay, so its sort of founding act, it was called the Cert Declaration. So it was signed in Sirte, which is in Libya, back in September. So that's a name, a declaration that does get mentioned here and there, so it's good to know. And its chief goals, I mean, I'm taking a lot of this from Wikipedia, so you have quite a long entry on Wikipedia telling you about the African Union. I've sort of boiled it down to the most important bits. To the two chief goals, and are most relevant to our work, let's say at the UN, are to promote and protect human and people's rights in accordance with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and other relevant human rights instruments, like the UN, all the UN instruments, for example. But yeah, you'll hear the mention of this charter quite a bit, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And the second key objective, as far as we're concerned, is to coordinate and harmonize the policies between the existing and future regional economic communities for the gradual attainment of the objectives of the Union. So these economic communities, I think we've come across them before in previous episodes. Ecowas, ECAS, they're quite important players. It's useful to know a bit about them, what they do. So, okay, so the African Union itself, what are its sort of constituent parts, its administrative bodies? Well, the top body, it's called the Assembly of the African Union. So this is made up of all the heads of state or government of the member states. There are 55 member states, incidentally. And the Assembly is currently chaired by Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa. Next, you have the African Union Commission. Now, you hear a bit more about them than you do, let's say, about the Assembly. So the African Union Commission is made up of 10 commissioners and supporting staff headquartered in Addis. It's a bit like the European Commission, and it administers and coordinates the African Union's activities and meetings. So I guess maybe a bit like the UN Secretariat. And then the body that is perhaps most relevant to us, that we most hear referred to, is the Peace and Security Council, the PSC sometimes. So this was established in 2004 under a protocol to the Constitutive Act that was adopted by the African Union Assembly. And so it defines the Peace and Security Council as a collective security early warning arrangement to facilitate timely and effective response to conflict situations in Africa. Other responsibilities conferred to the PSC by the protocol include prevention, management, resolution of conflicts, post-conflict peace building, and developing common defense policies. There are 15 members of the Peace and Security Council that are elected on a regional basis. And so it works, it's meant to function in a similar manner to the UN Security Council. In terms of instruments, then, I think I already, so then we have another body is called the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. You hear this sort of collocation of words come up a lot when it comes to the African Union, human and people's rights. That's the sort of buzz phrase for them. So that's been around since 1986, and it was established under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which you can apparently call the African Charter for short. And it's the top African human rights body, and it monitors and promotes compliance with the African Charter. Now, as I say, one of the important features of the African Union are these 8 regional economic commissions that sort of fall under its auspices that were each of them was established under a separate treaty in 1991. Okay, I'll give you the all 8, but then I'll tell you which are the key ones. You have the Arab Maghreb Union, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, the Community of Sahel-Saharan States, the East African Community, the Economic Community of Central African States, the Economic Community of West African States, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and the Southern Africa Development Community. Now, for our purposes, the most important ones are the Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas. They get mentioned a lot. They'll get mentioned in this statement coming up, as will the Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS. And then maybe slightly less so, you have the East African Community, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC. The other ones, I don't think I've ever really come across them at work, to be honest. But yeah, your main ones, they all tend to be known by their acronyms: ECOWAS, ECAS, IGAD, SADC, EAC, AAC. And they're important because not only are they economic commissions, but they're often involved in peacekeeping. They often send military missions to countries that are in conflict. For example, Ecowas, they have sent peacekeepers to, among other places, Côte d'Ivoire in 2003, to Liberia 2003, Guinea-Bissau 2012, Mali in 2013. That would have been a big one, I guess. And Gambia in 2017. ECAS. There's an important mission that they're known for called MICOPAX, which I have run into actually at work every now and then. So this was a mission to the Central African Republic, and it was involved. Yeah, it was established in response to the conflict in that country, in the Central African Republic, the CAR, as it's sometimes known, between 2012 and 2013. And then you have, IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority in Development. So they deployed a peace support mission to Somalia back in 2006, which was subsequently replaced by the UN mission that was called AMISOM. So yeah, these the African Union, that's the African Union, and they have these African regional commissions that are pretty important. And you also have, by the way, speaking of the military aspects, another thing called the African Standby Force, which is designed to be deployed in emergencies. I'm not certain how active it is, the African Standby Force, if it's still more on paper than really being used in earnest, but that's, again, something that's being readied and something that they're trying to develop. So that gives you just the main sort of background to the African Union. That would be enough for you to get on with some some background to starting the statement. And with that fairly quick introduction, I think we're going to move now to the academic part of the episode. And this is the bit where I just tell you, give you the 4-point plan. You go to the description box, and there you find a link to the original statement by Mr. Muhammad. My advice to you is to follow that link, to record yourself interpreting that statement. It's about 10 minutes long. And then you go to the other link in the description box, which will take you to a hard copy of that original statement. Print that off. And then basically you watch the show and you take notes, and you see if there's any useful tips and advice that I can give you, what you've done right, what you've done wrong, what good synonyms you can learn. That's the famous interpretation station 4-point plan of follow the link, record yourself, print the statement, and watch the show. The Frappu plan. Very catchy. Let's see if we can make it viral. Okay, so I'll leave you to do that, and I'll see you on the other side. Me, you, Dwayne, and Musa, all together. All right. Okay. Well, if everyone's sitting comfortably, we can get this show on the road. So, as I said before, Musa Faki Mohammed, who, contrary to what I told you 10 minutes ago, he is actually the chairman of the African Union Commission, and has been since 2017. He was actually previously the Prime Minister of Chad from 2003 to 2005. Bit of background on our man Musa. Okay, so with that, let's get things started. So, as I say, Dwayne's voice in the background, and let's see how he did this statement.
Security Council President, distinguished council members, Secretary General of the UN, ladies and gentlemen. The African Union joins the President of the Council in extending condolences to the United States of America following the passing of President Bush. During his long career, he has represented his country before this august body, the Security Council.
Okay, so there's just a few little points here. So, l'Union africaine se joint au président du conseil. Sometimes this, I know beginners, this can sort of throw things. People like, what do you say? Like for the se joint, so Dwayne just says joins the president of the council in doing something or other. That's one standard formula. You can also say, that we align with somebody, we echo what was said by somebody. There's a sort of a few different solutions. That shouldn't be something that troubles you too much. And then this sort of collocation, so for condolences, so that Dwayne that uses extending condolences, which is nice. Yeah, yes, you can offer condolences as well, present them. Extend is probably the best option. And then he talks about le décès du président George H.W. Bush. So again, he uses a nice word here, the passing of President Bush. I think when I did the death. Passing is perhaps a little bit better. And yes, I was going to say, yes, this is actually about George Bush Senior. I do beg your pardon, of course, he finished this sentence. So one other thing I was going to point out, Auguste Organe. So you want to have a couple of synonyms when they talk about the forum as, so I think Dwayne uses this august body, which is very nice. Another typical one to use is these hallowed halls, if you want something different. Hallowed halls is a good one. So you want just a couple of these that you can throw in. On we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, by focusing on this subject, peace building and sustaining peace, post-conflict reconstruction, peace, security, and stability, and by sharing with us today its post-conflict experience, Côte d'Ivoire is doing us all a great service.
Okay, this is very nice. I mean, I've got to say, originally I was going to. So Dwayne very rightly says, consolidation, peace building. Because you have obviously the Commission de la Consolidation de la Paix, which is an important body that meets generally in New York. When I was in New York before, I used to do quite a few of their meetings. They're often focusing on conflict in Africa. They call it it's the CCP in French. I say PBC in English. They come up a bit, as I say, more in New York. And so you need to just make sure that you have these three concepts properly sort of separated. So you have peacekeeping, which is associated with the blue helmets and all that. You have peace building, then la consolidation. So you had maintien de la paix, consolidation de la paix, and as I say, this rather newer concept of sustaining peace. Which in French is pérennisation de la paix. And then I wasn't going to call Dwayne out, but I was going to say for la reconstruction post-conflit, I was going to say maybe you hear rebuilding more than reconstruction. But Dwayne had obviously done his due diligence and he'd looked at the title of the meeting, which of course is post-conflict reconstruction, peace, security, and stability. So in fact, reconstruction is the word of the day there. It's the word they're using. But I just generally I tend to use rebuilding, but doesn't matter too much. And this is an interesting little phrase. La Côte d'Ivoire fait œuvre utile. So doing us a great service, doing useful work, something along those lines.
The countries where recurring conflict persists, particularly in Africa, would do well by drawing inspiration from this enlightening experience in more ways than one.
This is a important little phrase. S'inspirer de. So Dwayne has gone for the full to draw inspiration from. To be honest, I think you can just say can draw on. I don't think you need to put in the inspiration. When you hear that s'inspire, at least me in the old days when I was doing it, I'd get lost. That word, I'd get hooked on that word inspiration and feel that I should somehow use inspire or inspiration in English. Like to inspire themselves from, and I'd get, you can sort of trip up, can trip up on your own words. But you just say to draw on is fine. And then, okay, an expérience éclairante, an enlightening experience, for example, an edifying experience.
Also would like to pay tribute to President Alassane Ouattara. His presence here reflects the significance of this debate.
Okay, so he's referring here that you have in the chamber. Well, I think he spoke indeed. I think the president of the council for that month was Côte d'Ivoire. It's a rotating presidency in the Security Council. Each member gets one month, regardless of whether they're permanent or non-permanent. And so for this specific meeting, the actual president of Côte d'Ivoire, Ouattara, was in attendance. So it was obviously an important meeting. And rendre hommage, certainly pay tribute, as Dwayne rightly said. And then again, rehausse l'importance, stresses the importance, highlights the importance. Those two words are just, you want your stress, highlight, reiterate. Always think of them as a bit of a package.
I also would like to reiterate my gratitude to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his commitment.
Okay, so he's going to talk about, he talks about engagement. I've used it a few times in this statement. So that's my classic go-to, like Dwayne, commitment. Don't worry about engagement. This doesn't quite sound right in English. So for engagement, you want commitment. And he's obviously referring to Gutierrez is there. He actually spoke just before Mr. Mohammed.
Since taking office, he has worked tirelessly to strengthen partnerships, particularly with the African Union.
Okay, prise de fonction, that's an important expression, and you shouldn't, just have taking office. And you could say assumed his mandate as well, I guess, but taking office is a very neat way of just expressing that idea and moving on. And then this is another fairly common, very high register expression. N'a eu de cesse d'œuvrer. They say that quite a bit. Just work tirelessly, you can say. In fact, you could just actually say he has strived, or is it striven? What's the past participle of strive? Strive, strove, striven. All that all those four words, n'a eu de cesse d'œuvrer, that can all basically be boiled down to he's striven to bolster the partnership. Just an idea for you. But find out what's that third part? Strived or striven?
Ladies and gentlemen, the quest for peace is a long journey. It demands commitment from all national stakeholders and ongoing support from the international community.
Okay, so here he is talking about commitment again and engagement. Another important little expression, les parties prenantes nationales, so stakeholders, that's the best word in English by far. Interested parties, I guess you could say, but that doesn't sound that good. Stakeholders sounds very neat, professional. And I like what he's done, soutien continu. He talks about ongoing support. That's very nice. Continue. I think I may have said continued support, which is okay, but I think ongoing support is the best there.
Without international support, national efforts cannot overcome the numerous obstacles that lie in wait on the path to peace.
Okay, so again, accompagnement is a word that they use often in French, and that's again support is the word. Rarely is accompaniment the best solution. Your go-to there really should just be support when you hear accompagnement. If you want to be, you could say backing. That's actually always my other sort of substitute option for support. Support backing. And oh yes, so the obstacles, les obstacles qui se dressent sur le chemin de la paix. So Dwayne has gone with lie in wait on the path to peace, or something similar, like could be stand in the way, lie in wait, same thing, synonyms.
Without strong national political will, international assistance cannot possibly produce sustainable results.
Again, just a couple of small things. So he's gone with producing results. I'd say slightly better than producing might be to yield. We talk about yielding results, yielding benefits. That's a good word in English. And often in these things, when they talk about durable, résultat durable, I see what Dwayne's done. He's gone with sustainable because, you have the ODD, for example, les objectifs de développement durable. My guess is he made that, his synapse made that link, and that's why he went for sustainable. Maybe lasting is better, I think, when it comes to results, lasting peace, etc. Again, sustainable is okay, is just fine, but lasting it's shorter, and I think it just sounds a bit nicer.
Cote d'Ivoire is a clear example of the fact that peace is possible when the will exists.
Okay, this is he's summed this up nicely. Peace, an entreprise à portée de main. Again, he's gentlemanly speaking at a very high register, and so Dwayne's just got to the point. This peace is possible. Peace is within reach. This expression dès lors que, again, it's maybe one that might throw sort of people who are newer to the business, shall we say? So provided, so long as the willingness exists. Oh, another idea I had, sorry, for entreprise à portée de main. Instead of possible, he could have said perhaps viable. It's a viable. Peace is viable. The solution could be viable. That's another good word.
While Africa is stepping up efforts to silence guns by 2020, the Ivorian story is a source of encouragement.
Okay, I like that. Silencing the guns, faire taire les armes, yeah, silence the weapons, silence the guns. That sounds good. And it's good what he's done for La Trajectoire Ivoirienne, the Ivorian story. That's very nice. I think when I did it, I said Ivory Coast's maybe experience, or maybe even just said trajectory. But I think story is a very good solution.
The recent developments in the Horn of Africa are also encouraging.
And again, les évolutions. There are certain cases where you can talk about evolution in English, and indeed in statements, but generally your best bet is to go with developments, the latest developments. Now, one useful point to make here, the Horn of Africa that he refers to. And I've got to admit, they talk quite a bit about the Horn of Africa. That gets mentioned a lot. So yes, the Horn of Africa is a geographic territory that does tend to get referred to quite a bit. There's quite a few conflicts going on there. And you know what? I've got to admit that I've never actually looked in detail as to what exactly is covered by the Horn of Africa. And it's only really today that I've done my sort of homework finally, because I just usually I just say the Horn of Africa. But it's always good to know actually what exactly they're talking about, what part of Africa specifically they're talking about. And so if you look just at this map, you'll see The countries involved are Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. So as you can see, it's that bit of northeastern Africa that sticks out into which ocean is that? Is it the Indian Ocean? And it looks a bit like a horn. So there you go. You now know where the Horn of Africa is. Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia.
I'm pleased to mention that the political will and the determination that made the exit strategy possible for Cote d'Ivoire have continued to encourage the Ivorian authorities in the post-conflict phase.
Okay, so rendre possible. In English, we can just do that. To enable, one word makes it much simpler. Sortie de crise. Okay, so he's gone with, I think, the exit strategy in Cote d'Ivoire, which is okay, sort of bit of a paraphrase, I guess. So yeah, the solution to the crisis, enabled the end to the crisis. Find something that sounds nice in English. He's continué d'animer les autorités ivoiriennes. So he said to encourage the authorities, they need to encourage is fine. To motivate, to spur on. Also, other possible solutions.
On the political front, extending a hand to old enemies has opened the door to reconciliation.
Okay, so this is a phrase that gets used quite a bit, the idea of la main tendue. And I like what he's done here because he's sort of turned it from, this is like a noun, la main tendue. So he's turned it into like a verb, extending the hand. So that's what you have. I mean, that's a good way of doing that. That's a good solution to that. As I say, it's a concept that does get evoked quite often. And I like what you said, to l'ennemi d'hier, to old enemies. That's good. I mean, I think I said when I did it, yesterday's enemies. Franchir des pas décisifs. It's the idea of crossing a threshold, taking a step across a threshold. So he said, open the door to reconciliation, to take decisive steps towards reconciliation. There's another alternative. I think that's more closer to what I did when I did it.
The courageous measures announced by President Ouattara in August for the 58th anniversary of the independence of his country are a prime example of this.
Okay. This is all in reference because there was some political turmoil for a time back in Cote d'Ivoire. So this is, all about referring to how the political settlement was reached. When he says, by the way, just, in French, they say en août dernier, where if we're now in, let's say it's September, in October, whatever, and we say en août dernier, they just mean that August 2 months ago, and they say the dernier. It can be a little bit confusing in English because we just say in August. If you're let's say in August, in October now, and the event happened in August, we would just say that it happened in August. We wouldn't say last August. If we would say last August, we would sort of be talking about August of the previous year. So that's just one thing to watch out for when you hear that dernier in reference to months. Usually you just leave it. If they say en janvier dernier, just say in January. And he said, so for emblématique, a prime example in this respect, you can just say emblematic here. You can just use the calque and it's fine.
On the economic front, strong economic growth over the past years, along with impressive infrastructure development, have brought Cote d'Ivoire the long-wanted emergence needed for long-term stability.
There's a couple of little bit interesting things in this segment. Rapprocher la Côte d'Ivoire de l'émergence souhaitée. So this use of the word rapprocher. And when he said, if you hear rapprocher la Côte d'Ivoire de, it's hard to tell exactly where he's going. You don't know quite how that rapprocher is going to be used. This is an example like when you want like a sort of safety word that you can adjust as you go along. What I mean is here, and I think Dwayne used it. So bring. So he said, has brought Côte d'Ivoire. Now you don't know if he's going to talk about bringing them closer in terms of distance. You'll see it used again a bit later. But so here he says, rapprocher la Côte d'Ivoire de l'émergence souhaitée. So you can just say, it's brought Côte d'Ivoire, and then you can just say that it's brought them closer, let's say, to the long awaited, he said long wanted, you can say long anticipated emergence. So this is an example. I say sometimes you have to just play safe with a word, with a sort of neutral word, and that you can adjust. You use, like, I guess we call them phrasal verbs in English, like bring closer, bring up to whatever. That's it. And then, okay, and what he does nicely, he misses a couple of words. And this is a good example. He actually paraphrases the sentence a bit, but without losing the flow. A listener wouldn't know that. I think he misses out the expression poser des jalons. You see, he talks about the long wanted emergence needed for long-term stability. So he's lost those few words, but he keeps going, and he makes the sentence sound very smooth. So that's a good coping technique. It's going to happen that you're going to miss the occasional expression here and there. So what you need to do is you need to make it sound like it's a convincing sentence. You have to. Well, it's all a bit of a confidence trick, isn't it? You have to convince. The idea is that the listener will just hear that and think that that's an exact copy of the original. So this expression "poser des jalons," it just means like lay the foundations. Otherwise, but that's a good coping strategy that Dwayne has exhibited there.
Ladies and gentlemen, in any conflict, reducing guns to silence or silencing guns is just the first step.
Okay. By the way, he talks, ladies and gentlemen, if you're feeling under stress, if you're in an exam condition, I mean, the speed of delivery in this statement, it's pretty pleasant. It's all delivered, it's fairly medium pace, very clear. But if you feel like you need a breather, just drop, ladies and gentlemen. Just take a breath, and then on you go.
Bringing peace requires ongoing efforts and long-term commitments that go far beyond the peacekeeping missions.
Okay, enraciner durablement la paix. This verb enraciner, the only tricky thing about it is that in English we reflect that idea slightly differently. We would probably in English say for peace to take root. Okay, but in French they use like the root as the verb. So something that's similar, perhaps you could say. If you wanted to immediately translate the verb, you could say like entrenching or embedding, even just establishing lasting peace. Again, here we have this durablement referring to peace. Lasting peace is the best. Just one other thing here. La durée de vie des missions de maintien de la paix. I think he skips it in his version, but life cycle is another very good concept to have generally when they talk about various instruments, missions, whatever, life cycle.
This can best be seen by paying close attention to the finding that indicates that 40% of countries in the post-conflict phase fall back into violence 10 years after escaping it.
Okay, this is again, it's all very nice, very high register, the French, and Dwayne deals with it very nicely. Le constat, that can be, I remember that was a word that used to trouble me in my early days, le constat. And I think he actually skips, he does it in such a way, I think he talks about the finding, sorry. I always find a sort of neutral solution for that is like the observation, okay? But yeah, the finding could work. other possible alternatives could be the fact that, the conclusion that. I think it's a structure that the French perhaps use a bit more than we do in English. But yeah, I'd say just a ready-made sort of neutral solution might be the observation or the conclusion. Take your pick. Take your pick. And rechute dans la violence, fall back into violence, I think is, as he said, is probably the best solution. You often talk about in English we might talk about resurgences of violence, but you'd have to fit in a resurgence of violence. You'd have to tweak the rest of the sentence. In English you might say 40% of post-conflict countries see a resurgence of violence 10 years after escaping from it. So you have to tweak the sentence so that you don't have to do that tweaking. You can just, as I say, fall back into, and that does the job perfectly well.
Aware of this state of affairs, the African Union in 2006 passed a framework document on post-conflict reconstruction and development to serve as a guide to attack the root causes of conflict and prevent the return to violence.
Okay, so yeah, les causes profondes, that's my favorite sort of solution, is the root causes. It talks about attacking the root causes. I perhaps would be more likely to address them or to tackle them. Again, these are words that you need to keep spinning around. They need to be constantly spinning around your head to be used at the right moment.
This was followed in 2010 by the African Solidarity Initiative, which is based on the principle of intercontinental support.
This is an expression that comes up quite a bit in French, this idea of l'entraide. And I don't think in English we have a one-word solution for that. And it's interesting what Duane does here, because he realizes that this concept of maybe in English we would call it mutual support, mutual assistance. So he said he realizes that there's this idea of so he says intercontinental support. The only thing I'd say with that is with intercontinental, I think would mean different continents helping each other, where the idea I think is that the speaker is trying to get over is that the members within that continent, within Africa, helping each other. So for entraide, you might want to say mutual support. Okay, I mean, I was also wondering, you have self-help groups, don't you, for people suffering from various addictions, where they all basically get together and sort of give each other a pat on the back and encourage each other. I wonder if you could talk about continental, based on the principle of continental self-help. Now that I hear it, doesn't sound that great. Mutual support.
On the ground, the African Union is making meaningful contributions through rapid impact projects, technical support in key areas, and advocating for the mobilization of required support.
I like what he's done with contribution tangible. I mean, you could just say tangible contribution, which I think I did. So he's gone for meaningful contribution. It's funny enough, meaningful is a word that tends to get left by the wayside a lot. When I think in English political speak, on the news, you often hear about a meaningful contribution, meaningful support, whatever. It's a good word to have, meaningful. So I like what he's done there. One other. Okay, he makes a reference here. There's this reference to projet à impact rapide. I think he said rapid impact. Now, this is actually a concept. This is actually a set concept that it's within the Peace Building Commission. This is one of their instruments, in countries coming out of conflict. They're called QIPs, Quick Impact Projects. And this is one of the tools they have to try and, boost a bit of economic activity. So that's actually a set phrase. Quick impact projects are QIPs. I hadn't come across that in a few years, actually. since I left New York in 2017, I was thinking, it just suddenly came, I just suddenly remembered quips. And then, okay, plaidoyer is an important notion. Advocacy. You'll hear that a lot, that concept, plaidoyer. So.
These practical steps by the African Union showcase the resolve of African leaders to assume their role in the promotion of peace and security on the continent.
Okay, there's a couple of good examples of here how you can really save yourself a little bit of time and effort going from French into English. I mean, illustre la ferme volonté. So Dwayne has gone for to showcase the resolve. Now that sounds really classy. What I really like actually is more than the showcase, how he's turned la ferme volonté, the two words in French, or if you like the three words, into resolve. You see, in English, you often have a solution, a one-word solution to a concept that is emphasized in other languages. You get it a lot in Russian, for example, but here you have it in French. You could say the firm will, or whatever, but that firm will, as Dwayne rightly says, that in one word can be summed up by the idea of resolve. So you don't need an adjective. When you've got the resolve, that's it. That speaks for itself. And the other thing I was going to say, assumer la part de responsabilité qui leur revient. Well, this is just a very highfalutin way of just saying, assuming their responsibilities, playing their part. Again, I think I've mentioned this before. This is a classic, more French African form of speaking. Often you find, the French Africans, the quality of French that they use is a cut above the French counterparts. It's a bit like you find it with English. To be honest, these days, the most pleasant sounding English speakers, the best literary speakers, it's not the British, the UK delegation, and the Pakistanis. They sort of use much more it's all much more poetic, much more vivid images that they conjure up. And it's a bit like that, I think, with the French Africans. They tend to use a higher, it's more generally a more pleasant style. And it also gives you the chance, as I say, to take a few shortcuts. So when you hear something like la part de responsabilité qui leur revient, he's just saying, assume their responsibility, play their part.
The idea of self-reliance is an essential element in this renewed Africa. And thanks to this, leaders have committed to financing 25% of the continental agenda on peace and security.
Get a very nice solution here. Compter d'abord sur soi-même. He's gone with self-reliance. I know the Russians, when they talk about the situation in Africa, they talk about African solutions to African problems being like a big key principle going forward into the future. So this is that. I mean, that's precisely that idea, the idea of self-reliance. So that's maybe something that they try and reiterate when talking about the African, the African Union, the African countries, etc.
In response to the relevant instruments from the African Union and based on current and past experiences on the continent, we can never mention enough the importance of political inclusion, democratic governance, and the existence of national leadership focused on peace building.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I struggled when he speaks. I didn't quite hear this en écho aux instruments pertinents. And so Dwayne said, in response to the relevant AU instruments. I think en écho, it just means, in line with, consistent with, in step with. Okay, why am I giving you all these alternatives? In keeping with, you need to have these ones always cycling around again your brain, these synonyms for that concept of being in line with. And then later on in that sentence, Again, just a couple of small things. L'existence d'une direction nationale. So that's good how you said that the national leadership, national leaders, whatever. Consolidation de la paix. Remember, consolidation de la paix is a set phrase. It's peace building. It does happen. I'm sure I've done it in the past where I've slipped into consolidation of peace, but really it's peace building.
It is just as important to promote even development, to root out inequality, and to respond to the specific needs of the youth and women who are the first victims of these types of conflicts.
Okay, so he said even development. Perhaps I would have gone balanced development. It's closer perhaps to the French original. So he's got lutter résolument contre les inégalités. So he's gone with root out inequalities. I must say I generally like to combat things. I find that's a very versatile word for lutter contre, combat, just to combat whatever it happens to be. And then this the expression les premières victimes de ce genre de conflit. So Dwayne's just gone with the sort of like for like solution here, who tend to be the first victims of this kind of conflict. I don't know if in English that would be the most natural thing to say. It's fine. I mean, it gets over the message perfectly well. I guess in English, I'm just thinking that we probably say who tend to bear the brunt of such conflicts, who are hardest hit by such conflicts. So yeah, it's not a big deal, but again, those are two expressions, bearing the brunt of, hardest hit, that you want to have also at the ready.
Naturally, the dialectic relationship between peace and development is clear.
Yeah, dialectic relationship, whatever that means. Anyway, yeah, that you can just happily use the calc there.
Furthermore, it is important to include the work on disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration with the security sector reforms.
Okay, so here we go. He's using rapprocher again here. So this sort of picks up on what I was talking about earlier. Remember earlier he said rapprocher la Côte d'Ivoire de l'émergence souhaitée. So I said use the safety word, use bring. You can say bring Côte d'Ivoire the long-awaited emergence. Now here, you see the use of rapprocher is a bit different. Here it's more the idea of actually aligning them. Tasks linked. In fact, you don't know. You don't know where he's actually going to go here. When you read the full sentence, in fact, it's the idea is aligning them. Rapprocher les tâches liées au processus de désarmement, démobilisation, réinsertion à la réforme du secteur de la sécurité. You only know where he's really going when you hear the à la réforme. Only there do you realize where the link is with the rapprocher. So he wants these tasks to be aligned. So again, what the solution is here, you go with the rapprocher, you use like a safety word. You just say bring, okay, and you leave that bring hanging till you find out exactly where it's going. So you can say to bring the tasks linked to DDR, and then when you hear that à la réforme, then you can say into line with security sector reform. So that's a good little tip for you to have there. So when in doubt, try and find a neutral safety word, because if you commit to an idea, sometimes then you have to sort of take emergency measures to, you have to backtrack and correct yourself. Okay, and then these two concepts that I talked about, désarmement, démobilisation et de réinsertion. This is something we've talked about in previous episodes, is the famous DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. And often it goes hand in hand with this other concept of security sector reform. And indeed, and again, I think I've mentioned this before, sometimes they go the whole hog. You don't just get the DDR programs, you get the DDR, you get DD-RRR, disarmament, demobilization, repatriation, reinstallation, and reintegration. So it's always good to, if you hear one mentioned like the DDR, assume that you're probably going to hear SSR coming up in the same package. So it's always a good tip. If you hear DDR, always assume that you're probably going to hear the SSR coming up in the same package.
As well as the fight against impunity, and address each situation on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, the spécificité propre à chaque situation. Again, this is an idea, a notion that's often frequently raised at the UN. The idea that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to problems. That's something they use all the time. One-size-fits-all solution. And so you've got to treat each situation, as Dwayne says, on a case-by-case basis. Another expression I like to use is also on its own merits. I often like to speak about that, the merits of a certain case, treating a country situation on its own merits.
Ladies and gentlemen, restoring peace in Côte d'Ivoire is a success thanks to the partnership between the United Nations on the one hand and the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States on the other hand.
Okay, mettre à l'actif. So yeah, it's when you credit someone with something. I think when I did it, for example, I said is a victory to the credit of the partnership between the UN, etc. And so Dwayne has gone with thanks to. So the idea is that it's a good thing. And here we have this mention of the this regional community, the Ecowas. So as he's given it the full name, Economic Community of West African States. You could probably get away with throwing Ecowas in immediately as an acronym here. In this context, what they've been speaking, I'm sure everybody would recognize it. But it's also, sometimes I tell you, sometimes you want to give I guess it's a matter of personal feeling. If you feel that you want to introduce the full name to start with and then use the acronym, that's very good as well.
UNOCI took over the Ecowas mission deployed in 2002.
So you see here now he's moved to Ecowas. So he's done that very nicely. I mean, he probably felt that what the statement wasn't going so fast that he couldn't give the full name of it the first time, and then he reverts to the acronym. Another expression here, just to know, a pris la relève, so to take over from. This mission, I believe it was called UNOCI. I think that was the acronym that was sometimes used for this mission to Côte d'Ivoire.
Politically, the three organizations worked throughout the peace process closely. Resolutions from the Security Council on Côte d'Ivoire were often the culmination of decisions taken on a regional level and approved by the Peace and Security Council of the African Union.
Okay, the one thing I just point out here, this use of furent. Les résolutions du Conseil de sécurité sur la Côte d'Ivoire furent bien souvent, again, this is this high register French. And l'aboutissement de décision, so I think his solution was the same as mine. So we said culmination. I suppose you could say the fruit. When I read it like this, these resolutions were the fruit of decisions taken. I don't know if you could always use it. I'll have to keep an eye on that word, because let's face it, fruit, one syllable, culmination, 4. Using the fruit might get you out of a jam, fruit jam at some point. Okay, well, I'll keep my eye on it.
And over the past years, we have learned from each other in Côte d'Ivoire and throughout the continent. And the partnership between the African Union and the United Nations has improved significantly.
Okay, it's a long sentence here. Il est heureux de noter. It's always good to have a word just for that, to get that concept across. A good word I find is it's gratifying. That was a word I was taught on my when I did my internship at the UN, my intense 1-month internship before I got it was pleasing to note. Gratifying sounds more professional, more convincing, shall we say. C'est significativement renforcé. Yeah, renforcé. Another one of those words you want to have a couple of synonyms: bolstered, strengthened, enhanced. Those are my three.
Between the Commission and the General Secretariat, as well as between the Peace and Security Council and the Security Council of the United Nations. I also note the encouraging cooperation that has emerged between the Peace and Security Council and the Peace Building Commission of the UN.
S'est développé. I like how he's gone, has emerged. That sounds maybe a bit nice that then has developed, has emerged. Okay, so he's gone here, as he said, the Peace Building Commission of the UN. Now, by this point, I think you can you can just go straight to the acronym, the PBC. Everyone knows what the PBC is, so don't feel that you have to give it the full name in these sort of circumstances.
I reaffirm here the commitment of the African Union to continue building upon this collaboration and focusing on the African countries under review by the Peace Building Commission, but also those countries where peacekeeping missions are preparing to conclude their work.
So he's So the one thing I'd say here to Dwayne is he's calling them the African Union. Again, the Peace Building Commission. By this point, you feel free to use the acronyms, okay? AU and the PBC. Don't by any means feel that you have to give them the full name again. Save yourself the bother. Approfondir cette collaboration. So he talks about building on that cooperation. I tend to go with enhance when I hear approfondir. I mean, literally, it means to deepen but that doesn't sound right to me in English. So my go-to word for approfondir is to enhance. And he said for sur les pays africains objet de l'attention. So he says under review. Often, I mean, that might be taken a bit too literally. You know, I can imagine maybe. You have something called the Universal Periodic Review. There might be a slight misunderstanding. You might actually think they are actually under a specific review, maybe on their agenda, on the agenda of the PBC, or on the radar of the PBC, which is a very nice general sort of solution. On the radar, okay.
As we continue to strengthen our partnership, I should also mention the principles that should guide our common work as we fight for peace, stability, and development. Particularly, 1, national ownership.
Okay, that's a very important concept. I'll just say right. Appropriation nationale, national ownership. There's no alternative really to that. That's the word you need, ownership. Very common concept that is raised all the time at the UN and else generally in politics.
In this area, as in others, nothing sustainable can be expected if national stakeholders are not committed to peace building.
Okay, that's nice. Les acteurs nationaux. He's gone with stakeholders, which is good. You can say actors as well. That stakeholders is nice. N'assure pas la direction. Okay, so he said that aren't committed to the peace building process. I think it's more here the idea is that nothing can be achieved if they don't take charge of the process, if they don't assume leadership, assume ownership of the process. It's got to be led by them. Okay. A good example of this, for example, mentioned in the last episode, and it was about Syria, and the whole peace process in Syria. They're trying to draft a new constitution, and the idea is it's a Syrian-led, Syrian-owned process. So that's really the important concept. It's not just the commitment to it, but it's a bit more than that.
Second, the promotion of solutions adapted to the reality of each country.
Okay, adapted to the realities. If you want something a bit more glamorous than just adapted, tailored to the realities. But custom-made solutions, how about that? Maybe that's one to try if you get a text before. Often I'll say this, if you get a text beforehand, you can really play around. It helps it helps with your own increasing your own knowledge and skills. When you get a text, you have got the time to prepare. I would advise you just play around with it, see what interesting solutions you can come up with. So custom-made, tailor-made solutions.
This goes for the issue of justice after conflicts as well. According to its charter, the African Union is deeply committed to the fight against impunity.
Okay, Dwayne, I think, takes a slight leap here. Conformément à son acte constitutif. He says, according to its charter. I think he's maybe overcomplicating, maybe taking a bit of a leap, because it is actually, there is a constitutive act. That's what was signed in Cert. So just be watchful of that. Sometimes you can you can take a leap that just sometimes goes too far and might occasionally raise an eyebrow with the wrong listener. Attaché à la lutte contre l'impunité, committed to the, I think he said, the fight against impunity. Again, the struggle. I think Dwayne uses fight quite a bit in this text, or some to mix things up a bit, to vary things. I like struggle.
And this fight for justice must be waged in a way that welcomes reconciliation and based on justice, truth, and reconciliation.
Okay, so he's gone with the fight again, le combat pour la justice. So it's always good to have a couple of synonyms for that word, la lutte. I like how you say it's waged. Mener un combat, mener un lutte. That's a really nice solution, to wage a struggle. I think I just said to lead a struggle. Favorise la réconciliation. Again, this is it looks a simple word, but I think you want a good, straightforward solution to. So he's talking about welcomes the reconciliation. I don't think it's a bit different. I like with favorise going for foster, because favorise begins with an F, foster begins with an F, and it just sort of comes to me almost almost reactively. So I tend with favorise to foster reconciliation and lasting peace. And then he's gone, okay, this word again, this triptyque. So he's just skipped it, which is fine. Justice, truth, and reconciliation. Perhaps you could use, if you want to reflect that idea of the triptyque, the triad. I've heard that used in various contexts on other issues when you have a sort of three concept of three things, a triad. I did think that the triple whammy. It reminds me of back in the 90s, there was that, I can't remember, it was in a political campaign, they were talking about the double whammy of something or other. Kept on, John Major, early 1990s, some election, talked a lot about double whammy. And it did occur to me, to use triple whammy, but I don't think that would be quite the right register. So, triad is much nicer.
All other approaches could perpetuate division and create conditions for violence. This is the time and the place to rethink the founding principles of transitional justice.
Okay, that's nice. So this is the time and the place. For c'est le lieu, I mean, this is a common phrase that's used. A sort of neutral solution here is there is a need to. In English, again, it doesn't sound great. But it won't get you into any trouble. There is a need to. So he's talking for relecture, a rethink about these principles. A word I like is sometimes revisit. There's a need to revisit, these principles that underpin these founding principles. Have a think about that word, revisit.
Third, international support that is long-lasting.
Again, so a couple, accompagnement, again, international support. And this is another one of these expressions that they use a lot in French. S'inscrit dans la durée. And again, I remember when I was starting out, it was a sort of, would sometimes throw me a little bit. I sort of felt I had to exactly reflect the meaning given in the French, but you don't have to. It needs to be part of the long term. That's all that means.
Often, international mobilization slows down as soon as a crisis is no longer in the media.
Okay, so he's skipped out this word "hélas." I know a lot of people have been, they don't like using "alas." It sounds too old-fashioned. I'd be all right with it, alas. Often, alas. Yeah, why not? If you feel in that sort of mood. S'émousse, la mobilisation s'émousse. He says slows down, perhaps to dissipate, to wane. Something. What they all get that idea across. Even something even simple. If one of those sort of more poetic words doesn't come to mind, sometimes it just sort of falls away. Once a crisis, okay, so faire la une des médias, is no longer on the front pages. Les unes in French, the front page. So something like that. You could just say it when a crisis is no longer in the media, in the eyes of the media.
But this is
in the spotlight. Maybe there's one in the spotlight.
Is just the start of the most acute phase of sustainable promotion of peace.
The acute phase. You could just say the most delicate part. I think that's in English we would praise the most delicate part.
In conclusion, I would like to underscore that this debate on peace building is timely indeed.
Okay, so here's another sort of example where you need a sort of safety word here, where he goes, je voudrais en conclusion souligner à quel point, you don't know whether à quel point is going, okay? I mean, when you look at the full sentence in the end, à quel point ce débat sur la consolidation de la paix est opportune, you see obviously that in English you could just do it by saying to stress how timely this debate on peace building is, but you don't know that that's the way that the sentence is going to go until you hear that opportune. So if à quel point, you just have to, you play safe and you say to what extent, and then you can adapt the rest of the sentence as and where it sort of goes.
And I hope that this will lead to increased international mobilization where success demands the judicious combination of duty to solidarity and a long-term outlook. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Okay, and so in this conclusion, je forme le vœu. I like to say it is my wish. That's the sort of so Dwayne has gone with I hope, which is also fine. I would maybe say it is my wish because it sounds just slightly higher register than just I hope. Se traduise par, so he said leads to. I tend to play safe with this concept when they talk about se traduise par, just say is reflected by, is reflected in greater mobilization. And then there's another high register phrase towards the end, this conjugaison judicieuse, this sort of wise, judicious combination, mixture. And I like right at the end, he says, une vision à long terme, a long-term outlook, just for something. They always talk about vision. So yeah, maybe outlook is a nice alternative. Okay, so that's a good statement. It's a very helpful statement. It's a very sort of mainstream sort of statement, I would say, political statement, overview of a general situation, very typical of a sort of political statement that gets delivered at the UN. So that's a good one to practice. All right. And with that, we move to everybody's favorite part of the show, Roland's Magic Moments. To Roland's Magic Moments. And so what were the magic moments for today? Well, in third place, I've decided to go for sort of general concept, the idea of having this safety word. When you get into these sentences, I mean, we had this example 3 times, I think, in today's text, where you hear a verb and he's getting into an idea and you just don't quite know where he's exactly going to finish up. It was using the verb rapprocher. So my idea there was to use the sort of safety word like bring, and then at the end there you had this idea à quel point in the final paragraph. Again, you don't quite know what he's going to go for, so just say to what extent, and then again that allows you, that keeps all your options open. So yes, the bronze medal winner today is the concept of the safety word. So in second place for Roland's magic moments from today's episode is a concept. It may have been a magic moment in the past, to be honest. I'm not certain. This idea of appropriation nationale, very important concept. I can't reiterate it too much. Ownership. Okay, there's no alternative really to that. The idea that these solutions to these conflicts need to be owned by the countries in question. And yeah, a good way to remember that one is the situation in Syria, which is Syrian-led, Syrian-owned. I mean, did I use this a magic moment in the Syria episode as well? I don't know. Well, if I did use it, and I'm just repeating it, well, it just shows you that how important it is, or to what extent it is important. And finally, Roland's magic moment of the day. I really liked Dwayne's solution for this idea of la main tendue, extending the hand to one's enemies, extending the hand of friendship. It's an idea, it's a notion that gets used a lot, generally, with respect to conflict. So that's la main tendue is Roland's magic moment of the day. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I hope you've learned something, I trust. If you have enjoyed the episode, do smash the thumbs up button. Leave a comment, please, if anything's, if there's something you liked in particular or something you disagree with me on, a solution I've given that maybe you think you can think of something better, please do tell me. Also, if you haven't subscribed already, well, please, if you're getting some benefit out of the show, then please do subscribe. Please do. Tell your friends. Spread the word about the interpretation station to people you know. As usual, I will be putting in the description box below the video. I'll be putting in the link, all the important links to the original statement, to the hard copy, and I'll be putting in a link also to a couple of an article telling a bit more about the African Union. So to give you, to enhance your background knowledge. And so with that, all that remains for me to do now is to say, I should also just remind, just to sort of make a small announcement. We're getting very close to the big subscriber number 100. We're getting perilously close. I'm hoping that by the next episode, I will actually be able to announce who that 100th subscriber is, as the lucky recipient of the first item of official interpretation station merchandise. Fingers crossed. And also, yeah, I've got new ideas for new episodes coming up. Hopefully, I'm going to be doing some quizzes, and also I'm still intending to do like a question and answer sort of session pretty soon. All right, so all I'll say now is that episode 16 of the Interpretation Station is adjourned. See you next time.